from your guys' point of view, was he your Luke Littler, and would it be a massive miscarriage of justice almost that we haven't been able to enjoy what could have been, like, arguably the biggest waste of talent the sport will ever see?
They were once called the future of darts, teen prodigies, fearless newcomers, even miracle finalists who seemed destined for greatness, but in the blink of an eye, they were gone. Careers cut short, momentum lost, or scandals that erased them from the sport entirely. Today, we're looking at 7 Wonderkids who shocked the darting world and then disappeared. Corey Cadby wasn't just another promising youngster, he was a force of nature. Born in Tasmania, he dominated the Australian circuit in 2016, winning tournament after tournament until everyone knew his name. But the real turning point came when he faced a legend, Phil Taylor. In his very first televised appearance at the Sydney Masters, Cadby gave Taylor a scare before losing 6-3. Most rookies would have been happy just to share the stage. Cadby wasn't. A week later, in Perth, he got his revenge, crushing Taylor 6-2 with a stunning average over 103. That single match told the world, this kid isn't here to participate, he's here to take over. Soon after, Cadby captured the PDC World Youth Championship, and his swagger on stage earned him the nickname, The King. At just 20, he wasn't just winning, he was staring down world champions without blinking. When he stormed through qualifiers in early 2018, beating Rob Cross with a blistering 108 average, fans started asking if darts had found its next superstar. The moment that cemented his hype came at the UK Open. Cadby fought his way to the final, taking down names like Gerwyn Price and Robert Owen along the way. Under the bright lights, he faced Gary Anderson. Cadby lost 11-7, but nobody cared about the score. What mattered was that he'd gone from a brash newcomer in Australia to standing in a major final in just a couple of years. For many, it felt inevitable. This kid was going to be world champion. But while everything looked perfect on the stage, behind the scenes the chaos was already brewing. His UK visa became a nightmare. Delays and complications meant he missed months of crucial events, leaving him stuck at home when he should have been building on his momentum. In interviews, Cadby admitted the uncertainty hit him hard, financially and mentally. The king wanted to rule, but he couldn't even get into the country where the throne Saturday. And then came the darker headlines. A video surfaced online, apparently showing Cadby in a street fight, throwing punches and even kicking a man while he was down. Fans were stunned. This wasn't the confident young star they cheered on stage, this was something else entirely. Around the same time, rumours swirled about legal troubles in Australia, with some suggesting his record was part of the reason his visa issues dragged on. Whether every rumour was true or not, the damage to his reputation was done. By 2019, Cadby finally secured a visa and briefly looked ready to reset his career, but the momentum was gone. In 2023, he made one last push, storming through Q School to win back a PDC Tour card, only to never use it. By early 2024, the card was quietly removed, and with it, the last trace of the king on the professional circuit. Corey Cadby's story is the definition of rise and fall. A teenager who beat Phil Taylor, reached a major final, and looked set to conquer the sport undone, not by talent, but by the battles outside of the oche. He had everything a champion needed, except the stability to hold it together. And while Cadby's downfall came through chaos and missed chances, the next Wonderkid on this list lost his entire career to something even darker. Leighton Bennett's story is one of the most shocking falls in darts history. At just 13 years old, he wasn't just a kid with talent, he was a phenomenon. In 2019, he became the youngest ever BDO World Youth Champion. And soon after, he stunned the sport by beating none other than Phil Taylor, the greatest player of all time. That single win made headlines worldwide. Fans were already dreaming about a future rivalry between Bennett and another rising prodigy, Luke Littler, a clash some hoped would mirror Taylor and Van Barneveld. By the time he turned 16, Bennett had joined the PDC and looked set for a glittering career. He was throwing 9 darters, competing with seasoned pros, and showing the kind of fearless attitude that reminded people of a young Adrian Lewis. Everything pointed to a bright future. But in 2024, everything came crashing down. During the Modus Super Series, suspicious betting patterns linked to Bennett's matches triggered a Darts Regulation Authority investigation. He was suspended immediately, and months later, the results stunned the darting world. Bennett was found guilty on 10 different counts of match fixing across 4 matches. He'd also been caught giving inside information, working with an unregistered agent, and refusing to cooperate fully with investigators. The punishment was brutal. An 8-year ban, effectively ending his career before it had even started. Alongside that came a fine of more than £8,000. Sponsors dropped him overnight. Target Darts, who had backed him since his early teens, cut ties instantly and called the situation deeply disappointing. Clips of the matches under scrutiny quickly surfaced online, fueling the controversy. In one game, Bennett had a 164 checkout and bizarrely fired a dart nowhere near the ball. In another, he needed 47 and missed the double 16 by such a wide margin that fans were left shaking their heads. Some thought it looked clumsy, others said it was clearly deliberate. The verdict split the sport. Many argued the ban was deserved, but some, including top player James Wade, felt 8 years was far too harsh for someone so young. To him, Bennett deserved a chance at rehabilitation. But the DRA wasn't forgiving. At just 18 years old, Bennett was out of professional darts until 2032. For fans, it was heartbreaking. Here was a teenager who had beaten Phil Taylor, dreamed of rivalries with Luke Littler, and looked like the future of darts, only to throw it all away in a scandal that will follow him forever. Where most Wonderkids fade slowly, Bennett didn't fade at all. He was thrown out, exiled from the sport at the very age he was supposed to take it over. Kirk Shepherd's story is one of the strangest in darts, a fairy tale run that turned into a lifelong curse. Back in 2008, Shepherd was a 1-year-old qualifier, given odds of 1,000 to 1 to win the World Championship. Nobody expected anything from him. And yet, match after match, he survived. He knocked out top names like Terry Jenkins, Peter Manley, and Wayne Mardle, somehow clawing his way into the PDC World Championship final. What made his run even more remarkable was how ordinary it looked on paper. He never averaged above 90 inches the entire tournament, but he always did just enough to win. It was scrappy, it was improbable, and it had the whole darts world asking, who is this guy? Suddenly, the factory worker from Ramsgate, who just months before was playing county darts, was standing on stage at Alexandra Palace, facing John Part for the world title. Shepherd lost that final, 7-2, but for most, that didn't matter. The story of an unknown kid reaching the final was one of the most memorable world championships in history. Overnight, he went from complete obscurity to darting celebrity. Commentators said the run would change his life forever. And it did, but not in the way anyone expected, because after 2008, Shepherd never came close to repeating that success. The pressure of being the surprise finalist weighed on him heavily. Every time he stepped onto the oche, opponents and fans expected the same magic. Instead, he struggled with form, battled confidence issues, and faced the brutal reality that his one great run had raised expectations he couldn't meet. To make matters worse, Shepherd also developed dartitis, a condition where the throw breaks down under pressure, making it nearly impossible to release the dart naturally. It's one of the cruelest afflictions in the game, and for a player already trying to prove himself, it was devastating. By the 2010s, Shepherd was drifting in and out of the tour. He fought to hold on to his place, but the results weren't there. The Cinderella story had turned sour, and his name became more of a trivia question than a title contender. Finally, in 2022, Shepherd handed back his tour card, stepping away from the top level of the game for good. For fans, Kirk Shepherd will always be remembered as the 0-1 outsider who somehow reached the World Championship final. But for Shepherd himself, that magical run may have been both a blessing and a curse. It gave him a night in the spotlight that most players could only dream of, but it also set an impossible standard he could never live up to again. And while Shepherd's career faded under the weight of pressure and dartitis, the next name on our list, James Hubbard, was brought down by something far more gradual. The quiet disappearance of a player who once looked like the future. James Hubbard's career is the story of a young talent who rose fast, looked unstoppable, and then slowly slipped out of sight. Born in 1992, he first grabbed the spotlight in 2011 when he started playing PDC events. Just a year later, he shocked the darts world by winning the PDC World Youth Championship, beating none other than Michael van Gerwen in the final. That win wasn't just impressive, it was symbolic. Two of the brightest young players in the world, head to head, and Hubbard came out on top. That victory made him one of the sport's hottest prospects. He earned his tour card and quickly made his presence felt. In 2012, Hubbard stepped onto the biggest stage at the PDC World Championship and stunned everyone by knocking out the reigning world champion, Adrian Lewis, in the second round. Suddenly, this quiet, composed young man was seen as the next big thing. Pundits were calling him the future of English darts, a player destined to rise through the rankings and challenge for majors. But while his early years were filled with promise, the momentum never quite carried over. After 2012, Hubbard struggled to consistently perform at the highest level. He had flashes of brilliance runs in Players' Championship events, big wins against established names, but they were never followed by deep major runs. Year by year, his presence on the tour grew thinner, his name appearing less and less in the later rounds. The pressure of living up to that early hype began to take its toll. Hubbard admitted in interviews that the expectation weighed heavily on him. Unlike some players who thrive under the spotlight, he seemed to fade beneath it. By the mid-2010s, he was no longer considered a rising star, but rather another talent who hadn't quite fulfilled his potential. By 2018, his appearances in top-level tournaments had become rare, and soon after, he disappeared from the PDC entirely. For fans who remembered that fearless youngster beating Van Gerwen and Lewis, it was a strange and disappointing ending. The player who once carried the hopes of English darts had quietly slipped out of the picture with no dramatic exit, no headline scandal, just a slow, silent fade. James Hubbard's story isn't one of chaos or controversy. It's a quieter tragedy, the kind where raw potential simply evaporates under the weight of expectation. He showed the world he could beat the very best, but for reasons never fully clear, confidence, consistency, or pressure, he never stayed at that level. And while Hubbard's story was a slow decline, the next Wonderkids career burned bright and then abruptly stopped. Jaime Lewis had it all: talent, a breakthrough run, and the world at his feet, before making a shocking decision to step away from the sport entirely. Jaime Lewis was never supposed to make it as far as he did. For years, he was seen as a solid professional, talented, dangerous on his day, but not quite among the elite. Then came the 2018 World Championship. Entering the tournament as a qualifier, Lewis played with a freedom that stunned the darting world. He blasted through opponents with heavy scoring and relentless finishing, eventually storming all the way to the semi-finals at Alexandra Palace. On that stage, Lewis produced some of the best darts of his career, averaging over 100 in multiple matches and looking every bit like a future contender for major titles. Even though he fell short in the semi against Phil Taylor's old rival, Lewis had made his mark. At just 26 years old, he seemed to have arrived, but what followed was a sharp decline. After that magical run, Lewis struggled to replicate the same level. His form dipped, his confidence looked shattered, and his results dried up. By 2019, he was losing early in tournaments, often unable to find the consistency that had once carried him past the world's best. The highs of 2018 quickly faded into the background. Then came the most surprising twist. In 2020, still in his prime years, Lewis announced he was stepping away from professional darts to focus on his private life. The exact reasons were never fully detailed. Some suggested personal struggles, others pointed to the mental strain of competing at the top level, but the decision stunned fans. Here was a player who had reached the semi-finals of the biggest tournament in the world, now gone from the tour altogether. Today, Jaime Lewis's name is a reminder of how quickly things can change. In one moment, he was the fearless qualifier lighting up Ali Pali. In the next, he was gone, leaving behind questions about what might have been if he had managed to hold on to that form. For Benito van der Paar, the fall from grace wasn't sudden, it was a slow, painful unraveling. When the Dutchman first burst onto the PDC scene in 2014, he looked like the next big thing from the Netherlands. Tall, confident, and powerful on stage, he quickly started picking up Players' Championship titles and reached quarter-finals in major events like the World Match Play and the UK Open. Between 2015 and 2017, Van der Paar was everywhere dangerous in floor events, climbing the rankings, and considered one of the brightest young players in the game. At his peak, he was in the world's top 16, beating established stars and showing the kind of steady progression that usually leads to even bigger things. Fans assumed he would follow in the footsteps of his Dutch compatriots like Michael van Gerwen, but instead, the momentum stopped. From 2018 onwards, Van der Pas's form collapsed. He went from being a regular on TV to barely scraping results in early rounds. His confidence seemed to evaporate, his scoring power dulled, and opponents who once feared him now found easy wins. The decline was hard to watch, and whispers began to spread that something deeper was wrong. Later, Van der Pas opened up about battling depression, admitting that the pressure and struggles of life on tour had affected him heavily. He tried changing darts, altering his equipment, and pushing for a comeback, but nothing seemed to work. Commentators started calling him a forgotten thrower, a brutal but accurate description of how far he had fallen from his peak. Unlike others whose careers ended suddenly, Van der Pas's decline was drawn out, a slow slide from contender to afterthought. For fans, it was frustrating to see a player with such clear ability unable to find his way back. He had the talent, the experience, and the stage presence, but in the end, none of it was enough to stop the downward spiral. Keegan Brown's journey is one of hope, heartbreak, and quiet resilience. Nicknamed the Needle, he burst onto the scene in 2014 by winning the PDC World Youth Championship. That win alone put him in the spotlight, but what really grabbed people's attention was who he beat along the way: big names, established players who suddenly found themselves outplayed by a young man who was supposed to be just starting out. For a while, Brown lived up to the hype. He climbed into the world's top 32, played in the World Championship, and showed he had the scoring power and composure to hang with anyone. Commentators often praised his calm presence on stage, noting that he never seemed fazed by the big lights or the big names standing across from him. But as the years rolled on, the consistency faded. His form dipped, early exits piled up, and his ranking slipped lower and lower. Unlike some of the others on this list, Brown didn't disappear suddenly, he just seemed to slowly lose his edge. At times, he showed flashes of the player everyone expected him to become, but those moments became rarer with each passing season. What made Brown's story different, though, was his honesty. He admitted publicly that he struggled with self-belief and the mental side of the game. In interviews, he spoke about how hard it was to rebuild confidence after years of poor results, and how sometimes he questioned whether he still belonged at the top level. Despite the setbacks, Brown never gave up. In recent years, he's spoken about rediscovering his passion and fighting to prove himself again. He may not be the superstar many thought he would be, but his story isn't finished. Keegan Brown stands as the reminder that talent alone doesn't guarantee success, and that in darts, the mental game can be just as important as the physical one. 7 Wonderkids, 7 stories of talent, hype, and promise, cut short by scandal, pressure, or the weight of expectation. Corey Cadby, the fearless prodigy who beat Phil Taylor but was undone by off-board chaos. Leighton Bennett, the teenage phenom whose career was destroyed by match fixing before it even began. Kirk Shepherd, the miracle finalist who could never escape the shadow of his own fairy tale. James Hubbard, the quiet fade from youth champion to forgotten name. Jaime Lewis, who reached the semi-finals on the biggest stage, then walked away. Benito van der Pas, the Dutch powerhouse who lost his form and fought demons away from the board. And Keegan Brown, the youth champion who is still searching for the player he once was. These stories share a common thread: darts is unforgiving. For every Luke Littler or Michael van Gerwen who rises and stays at the top, there are countless prodigies who stumble, vanish, or never quite reach the heights expected of them. And that leaves one lingering question: who will be the next Wonderkid to disappear?